Hey everybody, I'm Alicia. Today we're going to be talking about my top 10 thriller, horror, and mystery books of 2021. So without any further ado, let's get right into the video. I can't believe I'm actually ranking books in a video. My other superlative videos haven't been ranked, and I will be counting down from book number 10 to book number 1. One thing that I do want to mention is that I do look for different stuff depending on whether I'm reading a mystery, a horror, or a thriller. For thrillers in general, I'm just looking to have a good time. I'm looking for a thriller that is really fun, that is really fast-paced and easy to read. Whereas for horror, I'm looking for something that's a little bit quieter, that really explores themes within the book itself. So you will notice that tonal shift as we get down to my number 1 pick, because they tend to be the horror books that I really enjoyed. When it comes to mystery novels, I'm still trying to figure out exactly what I like. I can confidently say that I liked well-developed mysteries with a lot of detail and a lot of nuance, and ones that keep me guessing time and time again without using cheap plot devices or without omitting information. I really don't like that in my mysteries at all, because I want to feel like a detective on the other side trying to solve the mystery. So that being said, let's get into our number 10 pick of this list, and that is going to be Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. Now this was actually the first Riley Sager book that I've read, and it's actually my favorite from the ones that I've read. Ever since then, it's kind of gone downhill. I've read Home Before Dark, Survive the Night, The Last Time I Lied, and the one in that pink cover whose name I always forget. For some reason, I can never remember that book. But yes, this is my favorite one, and what I really like about this one is one, that it's told in dual points of views. In general, any thriller that has dual timelines or is told in multiple perspectives is a book that I will generally really like, or one that will at least automatically be a 3-star for me, unless it's just very poorly written or it's very cliche. It was also a thriller that is very well paced. It's not too slow, it's not too fast, it has a consistent pace, and one that also had a generally good atmosphere. Riley Sager did a wonderful job, I think, creating that eerie atmosphere that we needed for a murder mystery slash haunted house ghost story setting. And although I didn't find Home Before Dark to be particularly scary, there were never any moments where I was genuinely afraid or like unsettled. I didn't feel that way at all, but what I did feel was entertainment. I was 100% entertained throughout the entirety of the book, which is why it's on this list, because an enjoyable read and entertainment is important to me. If you don't know what Home Before Dark is about, we're following Maggie, and Maggie restores homes. She has inherited a house from her father called Bainsbury Hall, and from what we know, 25 years into the past, they lived there for 3 weeks and then ended up moving away because some haunted house stuff potentially happened. Her father ended up writing a non-fiction book about it called House of Horrors, and now that she's older, she's interested in learning what really happened there. She thinks that everything that her dad talked about in that book is made up. So Maggie does go to Bainsbury Hall with the intention of restoring it, and then weird stuff starts to happen, and from there the plot starts to unravel, and it was just really entertaining, and that's why it's on this list. The next book on this list is The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, and this is a young adult mystery. Similarly to Home Before Dark, the reason why this book is on this list is just because it was wildly entertaining. Right from the beginning when I started reading it, it was just a book that I couldn't put down because I was having so much fun reading it. And part of it is too that I have in the past, or at least when I was a younger girl, kind of fantasized of like having a random stranger give me their entire inheritance and how that would sort of impact my life. But in this one, we are following Avery, who ends up receiving a very large inheritance, like this person's entire estate, and just like trillions of dollars from this complete stranger. Now, the only caveat to this is that she has to live at his mansion for a year before she can really claim that inheritance. The only problem is that his entire family lives there as well, and some of them may not be too happy that they were left out. And so Avery and the grandsons of this dude try to figure out why the inheritance was left to her. It was wildly fun and entertaining, and there's also a love triangle. So if you do enjoy a love triangle, this is one that has that in it. And you know what? It wasn't a badly done love triangle. I generally do love love triangles, but a lot of times they let me down. This one didn't. Going on to the number 8 spot, this will be going to White Smoke by Tiffany D. Jackson. I actually have a dedicated review for White Smoke and Tiffany D. Jackson is one of my favorite authors, so it's no surprise that this book is on this list. But this is a young adult horror with elements of a psychological thriller embedded in it and also with haunted house vibes. I honestly also thought this was a perfect blend of psychological thriller and a haunted house, but compared with Home Before Dark, White Smoke just has much more rich and thematic elements, and the nuance and care that Tiffany D. Jackson has when dealing with this wide range of themes is just incredible. And so some of the themes that she does tackle in this particular book is blended families, gentrification, drug abuse, anxiety disorders, the criminalization of Black bodies, and so much more. She just tackled so many different varied topics that halfway through the book I worried that not all of them would feel fleshed out, but they truly were very fleshed out, and I just thought that was so well done. The only gripe I have with White Smoke, and the reason why it's only number 8 on this list, is because the ending wasn't quite exactly what I imagined. We were left with a pretty big cliffhanger. The story technically didn't fully end, so I really hope that she comes out with a sequel or a novella or a short story or something. That way we know what happens at the end. And to give you a little brief synopsis of White Smoke, we have this blended family that is moving away from California to have a fresh start. We know some stuff happened in California, but it's not really revealed to us as readers. If you want a more in-depth review, I'll go ahead and link that video that I was talking about in the cards. Number 7 on this list is one that I've actually not really talked about, and the reason is because it's so difficult to pin down and talk about, but it's also difficult to recommend. And this is Hummingbird Salamander by Jeff Vandermeer, and this is primarily an eco thriller and feels and reads like a conspiracy filled puzzle box. It's very confusing right at the beginning. I kid you not, I was very confused when I started this. It was a similar experience to Piranesi when you dive in and you're like, what the heck is going on? But then slowly the layers are peeled back and you get to really understand the character motivations and the larger implications of what the story is trying to tell you. So if you've picked up Hummingbird Salamander and gave up maybe 4 or 5 chapters in, keep going to see if you enjoy it, because Jeff Vandermeer does a wonderful job of really just peeling back those layers and really giving you a very riveting and compelling story about climate change. And I think that's one of the things that I love most about Jeff Vandermeer's books, is that he cares so much about nature and about the environment, and all of his books are incredibly imaginative and incredibly unique, but also sometimes incredibly frustrating to get into, and they're so layered. There's just so many layers. This is a book that I can see myself rereading and rereading time and time again and finding something different within every single time. So to give you a quick synopsis of this, we have this unnamed narrator, and she refers to herself as Jane or Jill. She is extremely paranoid and becomes increasingly paranoid throughout the book, and Jill works as a security consultant for this firm. One day while she's getting coffee, she receives a box with a dead hummingbird inside of it, and this leads her on this very wild and very bizarre wild goose chase that a known eco-terrorist left for her. And from there, it's just wild. It takes a lot of turns. It's a book that genuinely made me feel anxious, and I think that's just a result of great writing. I really felt like I was in Jane's mind at times, and the paranoia that she felt, I felt, and it was a very bizarre out-of-body experience. That being said, she is an unreliable and an unlikable character, so just keep that in mind if you decide to pick this up. It is also a slower paced book, but the writing and the prose is just very beautiful. I'm briefly going to share a quote from this book because I just think that the writing was, "We have built so many toxic constructs we cannot see through the lattice work. We have built so many mirrors that there are no windows to shatter." Yes. In the number 6 spot, we have The Book of Accidents by Chuck Wendig, and this is a book that I recently read. This is a horror book, and if you've seen Dark on Netflix, it's a German show. I think you will really like this book because there are a lot of similarities with Dark. The tone feels exactly like Dark. It also similarly feels like Stephen King's early works, the narrative style and the tone in particular. We have this story set in this really small town in Pennsylvania, and you have have coal mines, and you have this very rich history to this town and very nuanced characters and great relationships. So it's very Stephen King-esque without the misogyny and the racism of Stephen King novels. So just want to point that out. But what I really loved about this book is how imaginative it was. Hear me out. I'm going to make a weird comparison, but if you've read The Starless Sea, The Starless Sea has a bunch of different disparate short stories that eventually sort of come together. This is the same. So it has a lot of different paths that it takes, and all of these different plot points that are introduced that are woven so intricately well together. I really enjoyed that. Now, this is not like The Starless Sea in that it's fantastical and very warm and very charming. This is not a charming book. It's a very dark book, but I love the way that it interconnected all of these stories and lores together into the main story, similarly to The Starless Sea. We have our main character, Nate, and his father just died, and his father is leaving him his estate. And again, this very small and rural town in Pennsylvania. But Nate was abused as a kid, and so he has a difficult relationship with his father. He's sort of hesitant to take the estate, but his wife convinces him that it's a good idea. His son is having a hard time in school. He has this innate ability to really feel other people's emotions, and he can get very overstimulated at times. So his family makes the move to this rural town, and from there weird shit starts to happen. But it's really good. It's also very long. I will have to say that I only really enjoyed 90% of the book. The last 100 pages sort of lost me, but I still feel like it's worth reading if you're a horror aficionado. The next book on this list is In the Woods by Tana French, and this is a mystery novel set in Ireland. And what I really loved about this book were the rich and nuanced characters and the character relationships. One thing that I really struggle with in the thriller, horror, and mystery genre is that a lot of characters can be well developed, but the relationships between characters and the character dynamics often fall flat for me. They don't feel very real or believable, but that is exactly what I loved in here, is that the character relationships, the character dynamics felt very true, very real, and very believable, and the characters themselves were also very well fleshed out. On top of that, it also has a very gripping storyline, and this is one of those books where I was very immersed. I felt like a detective, and I felt like I can solve this mystery alongside Adam and Cassie. Adam is the sole survivor to an unsolved mystery. When he was young, him and two of his friends went into the woods. He's the only one that came out. Several years later, once he's a grown-up, he becomes a detective with his partner Cassie Maddox, and in that same town where he grew up, a 12-year-old kid goes missing, and as they start to investigate, they start to see some similarities between the two cases. So is it connected? Is it not? I don't know. You'll have to read to find out. I do have to say that a lot of people have problem with the ending. I didn't really have a problem with the ending because I was more interested in the characters rather than the plot. But if you're someone who's a plot-driven reader, you might be a little bit disappointed by the end. So for the next two spots, I kind of cheated because I wanted to include two works by two separate authors, but instead I just ended up lumping the two works from each author into spots number 4 and number 3. And so at spot number 4, we have Stephen Graham Jones. And the two works that I read by Stephen Graham Jones this year were Mapping the Interior, but also Night of the Mannequins, which I don't actually have a copy of, and I am so sad, but I will go out and get one very soon because I love that book. And it's actually Night of the Mannequins that I want to talk to you about. Night of the Mannequins is about a night at the movies, a prank gone wrong. It's a novella that is bizarre, but it's extremely well written and it packs a punch. It also has this very comical side to it, and on top of that, it also has very rich thematic elements. So it's literally everything that I want in a horror book. I also thought that it was a great use of a novella format. One of the problems that I often find with horror novellas is that one element generally ends up not being well fleshed out. Either the characters suffer, the story suffers, the atmosphere suffers, or there's just not enough room to really explore themes. But that is not a problem with Night of the Mannequins. Every single word and sentence in this novella feels intentional, and I just really loved it. And so in this one, we are following following Sawyer and his group of friends. They end up finding a mannequin in a river one summer, and that mannequin ends up becoming part of the squad until, like any other toy, it is largely forgotten until it's brought back out to perform this prank at a movie theater, which goes extremely wrong. It's part slasher, part psychological thriller, and I highly recommend that you check it out. I can't really tell you much more about it because, again, it's a novella, it's very short, and I don't want to spoil anything. On the number 3 spot, we have a very new to me author, and this is Simone St. James. And I did read The Broken Girls and The Sundial Motel earlier this year. I equally loved both. They were both 5-star reads for me. And the one that I want to talk to you about today is The Sundial Motel, which was actually the first work that I read by her. What I loved about The Sundial Motel and The Broken Girls is that she has very well developed and nuanced characters. They're also extremely clever and well written, and the atmosphere is really what hooked me to really continue reading, but it was the characters and the cleverness of the plot that really sold it for me for both of these. They're also both told in dual timelines. The Sundial Motel is part ghost story and part murder mystery, and I really loved both elements here. I just thought that they were done so craftfully. The Sundial Motel specifically has that amateur sleuth detective trope, if that is something that you do like, and I just thought it was done very well. There's also this is a paranormal or is it not vibe, and it just worked really well. This is set in Fell, New York in 2 separate times, in 2017 and then in 1982. And so in 1982 we have one of our first main characters named Viv, and she is making her way through Fell to go to New York City and ends up staying there and working as a receptionist at the Sundial Motel. We know right from the beginning that she goes missing. Now in 2017, we're following her niece, whose name I completely forgot, but she's very interested in Viv's disappearance, and so she decides to go down to Fell and find out what happened to her aunt. And I just loved everything about this book. Simone St. James is coming out with a new book next year in 2022, and that is a book that I will be picking up, as well as checking out some of her backlisted titles because I am in love. Oh, we're getting down to the last 2. And so on the number 2 spot is one that is going to be very surprising. One, because I haven't really talked about this book on my channel, but also because it leans on the literary fiction side, and that is Leave the World Behind by Rumen Alam. And this is a literary thriller suspense novel. It's very quiet, it's very eerie, extremely character driven, has so many great fleshed out thematic elements. Do you notice a trend with the type of horror and suspense books that I gravitate to? So Leave the World Behind explores the complexities of race, class, privilege, power, ownership, family dynamics, possession. The list goes on and on and on. Loved this character study and this inverted role that the characters are placed in. And so in this one, we're following a white family who takes a week-long vacation in this very luxurious home in Long Island. And it's a home that they wish they could live in, that they can't really afford, but they're taking a vacation and they can pretend that they live this very luxurious life. Then this is turned upside down when the owners of the house, this black elderly couple, comes along and says, hey, there was a blackout in New York City and we don't feel safe, and so we returned home. I know you're renting this place out from us, but it's our home and we just want to stay here. And so it was just a great exploration between these two families, the white family who can't afford this house and the black family who actually owns this house. And at first, the white family is like, hey, should we let these people in? I don't really know you. And so really, it's a great exploration of race and class and what that means and what that entails. I really want to point out again that it is extremely character driven. It's also very slowly paced, but it does do a wonderful job of slowly building up this very eerie and sort of doomful atmosphere. And it's also one of those books that is very open-ended. So if you're someone who is a plot-driven reader, or if you're someone who enjoys a very tidy end, this one might be one that will disappoint you. And so, drumroll please. At the number 1 spot, we have The Devotion of Suspect X by Kaigo Higashino, and this was translated from Japanese by Alexander O. Smith. This is a Japanese mystery book, and it's one that I talked about in my Best of Translation Books video, so I will briefly touch on it, but I just loved how refreshing this mystery was. It's one where right from the beginning you know who the perpetrator is and you know who was killed, but you're following the detective of this case trying to figure everything out, what the motivations were, where it happened, and you also have this perpetrator who is very elaborately trying to dupe the investigator. This is one that I think you'll like if you like mysteries, but also one where you like a wide cast of characters. We just have a lot of parties involved around this murder in general. I also think you'll like this book if you're someone who's very analytical and who loves math. We do have a math professor that is somehow involved. We have a physicist who is also somehow involved. I'm being very vague because I want you to just experience this book if you decide to pick it up. But if you want more in-depth thoughts, go ahead and check out the Best in Translation books of 2021 because I do talk a little bit more about the synopsis in that video. Ooh. So we've made it to the end. Those were the best thriller, horror, and mystery books that I read in 2021. Let me know down below your top book in each of those categories because I would love to pick some of them up. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you on the next one. Bye!